So yeah. All right. So let me go ahead and get started. My name is Cindy Moss, the STEM boss. I'm with Defined Learning, and I'm here with two of my STEMigos and STEMinist friends, and from Richardson ISD. And I'm going to introduce them, and then we're going to kind of have a conversation about their journey as their goal is to do STEM for all for their district. Tabitha Branham, and the bottom, Tabitha Wave, yeah, Tabitha, she's the deputy superintendent of the Richardson ISD. And before that, she was assistant superintendent of secondary schools. I'm really surprised they've been able to keep her. She's going to be a superintendent somewhere. You guys just know that I said that. She was the director of social studies, language arts, instructional technology. She's been an associate principal, director of New Tech High in their district, the executive director of Leading and Learning, and she taught history to middle school in Capel ISD. She's almost finished with her doctorate, and I know what it's like to work full time and do that. So we're praying for you. We're happy you can see the light at the end of of the tunnel. But she's really just this progressive, innovative leader. In my time in the last 10 years, before COVID, this time last year, I just stopped all my traveling. I was averaging 4 flights a week. So I've met district leaders all over the world. They can either be comfortable or they can be courageous. And Tabitha is one of those courageous leaders who always does the right thing. And with her, she has Kendra Johnson, the executive director of STEM and Innovation, and she's been in that job for 3 years. She was recruited from Lancaster ISD, where she was at a T-STEM academy, but she's been a science coordinator, a secondary science specialist, and an instructional coach. So both of these ladies have street cred. Their teachers and principals trust them and love them. And they're just out there doing whatever it takes to do the right thing for their kids. They're in a place, they're not in a place where it's not like a private school where every kid has money for tutors and everything else. You're going to find out from them they're doing amazing things with their students and giving them hope with that 4-letter acronym STEM. So let me turn it. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of give you a little bit of information and then ask some questions. So if you think about what happened a year ago, this was right when everything fell apart. And so it's hard to believe it's been a year. We had business as usual up until this time a year ago. But now what we were doing in schools has finally shifted. And as I talk to districts, I hear from many of them they've lost kids, they don't know where they are. We've had teachers that have quit, lots of things have happened. And in many ways, our K 12 schools, as well as colleges and universities, are scrambling. They're having to use their STEM skills to adjust. So, why don't you ladies take us on a journey from March 2020 to the present and tell us how you've pivoted to make sure that teaching and learning have continued even in a remote situation?
Well, thank you, Cindy, so much. And thank you for your incredibly kind words. I would absolutely return all of that back to you times 10. There's nothing I loved more than sitting in the back of a room, listening and hanging on your every word, and watching teachers just connect, and think about the work that they do in the classroom with kids and the role that they have in changing a trajectory for a student and for a future STEMinist. It's an incredible thing to watch. So thank you for all you do for your advocacy for all kids. So first of all, I would just like to start off by making sure everyone really does know who Richardson ISD is, because I think the context is super important. And believe it or not, y'all, Richardson ISD is the fourth most diverse district in the entire state of Texas. And there are over 1,000 districts in the state of Texas. We serve over 39,000 students. We have 41 elementary campuses and 12 secondary campuses. Um, the Texas Education Agency often uses Richardson ISD as kind of the model for the state when they are trying to determine, whether or not something is going to work or if something applies, a certain principle applies. They often use our data because we really are representative of our state demographics. And you can see here, really, we are almost what you would consider a third, a third, and a third. Almost 40% of our students are Hispanic or Latinx, 30% white, and 20% of our students are Black African American, with almost 60% of our students being served through free and reduced lunch. So again, just want to make sure that you understand context is important. We serve an incredibly beautiful, diverse 39,000 kids. We have 6,000 staff members, and we have over 80 languages represented. So when a year ago, at this very moment, I can remember to the day, I was sitting over at one of our professional development sites, and we were actually, I don't even think that we were fully calling it the coronavirus yet. I think people were still trying, like, what is this thing? And how is it going to impact our kids? And we were like we are this week, a week before spring break, and we were starting to have students travel. And we were in a room having conversations about whether or not we were going to allow the theater team to go to New York, and where we were going to allow the drill team to travel to Hawaii, and beginning to make decisions around student travel. And within 72 hours of that day, we were making the decision whether or not we were going to close, and then making the announcement we were going to be closing indefinitely. And realizing that within it normally takes us longer to open up a normal school year face to face. And we were going to have less than a week to stand up a fully virtual school, for 39,000 students, of which 60,000 or 60% of them may not have the supports at home to be successful navigating virtual school. Everything from purchasing, 2,500 hotspots that we had to deploy overnight, to ensuring that we had devices that were deployed, and that every student, every secondary student could have a Chromebook, and every elementary student could have an iPad, similar to what all of you all have had to do. Like, our story is not different than yours. And then, most importantly, if you would have asked me a year ago, what would it take to get all of your teachers to be teaching virtually? How long would it take to get teachers there? I would have said after I retire, like maybe the next generation. And we had to do it in a week. And so I think it really, the catalyst, while there have been absolutely COVID slowdowns, or there have been a lot of COVID catalysts. And one of the greatest things that we celebrate is how it has allowed our teachers to think about the role of technology different, that role of pedagogical design and inquiry differently, because I have to engage my kids differently. I have to engage y'all differently, over this Zoom screen that I do in the classroom. And I think that has been a wonderful journey to watch. Kendra, I don't know what you would want to add to that.
So I would just simply add that the pivot, I think, is the most critical piece to bring out here. Is we know that COVID brought about so much uncertainty, and we weren't sure about what the next day would look like, but it also had some positive impacts, speaking to the catalyst that you spoke of. And that was, we now were faced with areas of opportunity to continue to grow our teachers and leaders to continue this type of teaching and learning. I have a quick little clip I want to show that our students put together about what they wanted us to do in terms of how are we responding to COVID-19, and what does the future of education look like in their future school.
Hello, my name is Mr. Shovel, and I'm a teacher at the School of the Future. Let's look at one of the first pathways. We're going to look at aviation and aeronautical sciences. Students will use flight simulators, drones, and aircraft parts into practice as working towards a potential pilot's license. The overall goal is to make connections between aviation and technology. Another pathway our students could choose is biotechnology and health sciences. With biotechnology, students here at Berkner High School use forensic investigation kits that study crime scenes to examine DNA. The students will also use biotechnology to understand how cells and viruses work and spread. A third pathway the students could choose is cybersecurity. Under the strand of cybersecurity, students will have a better foundation of computer networks and how they help protect all of our information. From cloud-based engineering to our most important encrypted personal information, giving them the edge to succeed in an ever-evolving connected society. The next strand we'd like to look at is engineering and robotics. Engineering and robotics go hand in hand. Through this strand, our students receive an education in building, CAD drawing, and computer programming, helping them understand how to problem solve and use technology to help them stay one step ahead of ever-changing technological advancements. Let's shift gears and look at global arts and communication. Global arts and communication helps our students captivate their audience with digital media and live performance recordings, helping students create their own film. From pre to post-production, filming on set, and using industry standard equipment and advanced editing software, students in this pathway can bring their ideas to life. Our final strand is STEM management. STEM management deals with the inner workings of the business world. With a dynamic and constantly changing landscape, this strand equips our students with the tools and flexible mindset, allowing them to thrive in their future business ventures. From understanding personal finances, supply chains, and much more, our students walk away with a leg ahead of the competition. And as you can see, here at the School of the Future, Berkner High School, our students graduate with an authentic work experience and real-world knowledge that positions them for predictable success in a somewhat unpredictable world. With so many options here at Berkner High School, the School of the Future isn't so far away. It's here at our fingertips. It's where inspiration and dedication lead to success in a global community.
So, Tab, do you want to take us back to April 17th? That's a great video, but we abruptly came to a halt, and life as we know it and school as we knew it no longer looks like this. But this is what our students wanted to see for the future. Take us back to April 17th when we got word that schools would be closed indefinitely.
Yeah, and actually, we announced that we were going to be closed the week of spring break, which was a month earlier, and then April 17th, we knew it would be for the remainder of the school year, and so we have been on a journey to ensure that all students and all really does mean all, and that is not an empty platitude, but rather it is a statement of commitment that all 39,000 of our students are going to connect, learn, grow, and succeed. And we had a hypothesis that in Richardson ISD, in one of our learning communities, the Berkner Learning Community, it's a high school with 2 junior highs and 14 elementaries that feed into it with over 11,000 students just in that one learning community. We had a hypothesis that if you gave students experiences, if you inspired them to think about what was possible, and if you scaffold that with instruction in the classroom that was engaging, that was inquiry driven, that allowed students to really explore those future ready skills that we know our kids need to be successful, that true trajectories could be changed, and that what once students thought possible for themselves what was now something totally different. And that started with pre-K, that started with our 3 and 4s and them understanding how to code their caterpillar robots, all the way through what you just saw featured in that video. And we were going to do that through amazing learning, like with Cindy Moss, and defined learning, and through a real kind of PBL driven culture. And so our challenge then on that day when we had to make that announcement was, we can't afford to take a step back from that. We can't, our kids they only have one shot at that grade level. Like they don't get to have third grade all over again. They have one shot. They're only that age and have that experience for one time. So how do we um, take this belief that we have about what school can look like in person and how do we translate that in this virtual setting? And we did that through the work of our teaching and learning department that swiftly redesigned our curriculum to teachers could access it anywhere, anytime, and it was redesigned to adjust to the platform. Our amazing integration technology team, like our I team and our professional development team, immediately put out job embedded professional development. It's like what we would dream for, right? It's like the things that we wish we would have been doing all along. But now there was this urgency, the need to know, just like we would want for kids in the classroom, the need to know was real for teachers as well. And so we had job embedded professional development where we were able to model for teachers how software programs can replicate that inquiry model that can happen face to face in the classroom. How can I make this kinesthetic learning experience in the classroom? How do I then translate that using technology softwares in like Jamboard and in those other tools? And how do I make that available? And that's what we did. And we did that. And we did that with follow up. We did that with persistence. We did that with grace. We constantly message to our staff and to our community and to our parents and to our students that the number one thing we could do right now is have grace with one another. We're not lowering our expectations, but we do recognize that we are going to try things and they're going to work. Like, hello, STEM, right? Problem solving process. We're going to try things that don't work. We're going to iterate. We're going to keep going until we find what works for all kids. And that's really what the spring was about. Kendra, I would love for you to share some of the experiences that we had designed for face to face, like our clubs and our activities, and even when I think about some of our PBLs, that normally the product outcome, often maybe was something that students in the classroom they would have to build or they would have to construct, and we had to think about that differently. How did you help really translate this new environment for our teachers?
So, working very, very closely with all of my teaching and learning colleagues, our STEM department recognized that we had an opportunity here. We had just gotten started with implementing across the board problem based learning as a strategy, and we were still in that learning phase. And so, thanks to our powerful partnerships, one of them being Define Learning, we were able to provide these key resources at a critical time so that our teachers didn't feel overwhelmed. So myself, along with the STEM specialists, started working together with our content specialists to embed these resources into our pacing tools. What that does now is remove the barrier of our teachers feeling that stress and overwhelming feeling of I've got to plan, I've got to communicate, I've got to make connections with my students, I've got to be engaging. So we wanted to take away one of those, stressors and say, hey, we're all in this together. We got this. And so being able to rely on those powerful partnerships, we were able to maintain our STEM culture amid the remote learning, challenges and considerations. And one of the things we do best is pivoting to offering things virtually. So our after school clubs, we didn't get rid of them, but our teachers decided to work after school online, being able to connect with our students as early as our second graders in their STEM and robotics clubs. We also started to solicit the support of our partners to bring in some authentic learning experiences and audiences for our students. So now our culminating products and presentations for PBLs were now in a virtual setting. So we were setting up Zooms and breakout rooms so that our students could continue to connect with STEM businesses and industry to not only continue learning and increase their STEM content knowledge, but we were also building capacity with our teachers as well. This also gave them a quick little break from the facilitation of teaching and learning and allowed our partners to come in and kind of help out. One of the things I would definitely say to everybody on this call is it does take a village. I know we use that cliche a lot, and it kind of gets underrepresented. But villages are important. Partners want to help us. And beginning last spring, we recognized who our true partners were. And we were able to tap into their resources, their human capital to continue the things that we want, that we usually do face to face, that we now had to shift to virtual. In addition to being able to offer our STEM clubs and competitions virtually, we continue through that same vein with professional learning. We do know that our teachers need a lot more TLC right now than PD. So we had to change our mindset to a more self-paced, you know, webinar kind of module feel for our teachers. We couldn't do our gathering face to face. We knew that they were getting burnout on Zoom meetings, but we still needed to continue to learn and connect and grow. And so, resources like Define Learning, resources like our STEM partners at our Richardson Chamber of Commerce, they were able to connect with us and provide an outlet for our teachers to continue to learn and engage in STEM. The last piece to our pivot is our families, our students and their families, and that communication piece. We are used to hosting parent universities, STEM family nights, and we wanted to continue to do those. And so we definitely saw a opportunity there to begin doing those things a little bit more virtually. And unfortunately, the pandemic is still here a year later. But what we see now is we've been able to really cast a wider net. Some of our parents that weren't able to come physically when we were doing these things face to face are now connecting, and they are engaged, and they understand what it is we are providing for their students and how they can partner with us to support that. So I guess, Tab, we might want to share with them, like, what are we doing now that we are a year in and we're looking forward to a kind of, indefinite future of virtual teaching? What does that now look like? Let's tell them about what we're trying to do there.
We absolutely recognize the power of our COVID catalyst and how we do not want to lose momentum, but rather want to harness that momentum to continue to propel us forward. So the fact that our teachers are trying things with technology that I promise a year ago I would have said, you will not see our teachers doing that in my generation. Well, now they're doing it and they're thriving. We have teachers who have said, I see now the potential of how technology can be the differentiator in my classroom. When I am trying to navigate, let's say I'm doing a PBL and I have my different groups and I am trying to address their different need to knows, I don't always have to be the one that is the person that they go to or that they can get the information from, but rather there's this whole world inside technology, and I now see what that can look like, and I can see that I don't always have to be the one that knows it all, that my students can be that resource. And so we are really working to continue to foster our teachers feeling confident using the technology and seeing the relevancy in the technology. um, we also, there has been so much evidence of like that PBL problem solving cycle everywhere you go. Like, what is it that we need to know in order to navigate this? Well, what do we know about the virus? What do we know about how do we mitigate risk so that we keep our loved ones safe? How I need to know how to navigate Zoom and how I'm going to organize. If I'm a 16-year-old, how am I going to organize? And I had a freshman in my home that was trying to navigate this. How do I navigate trying to think and organize myself differently? Those are all things that we know we are learning from, and now we are embedding those into our systems. But probably I would be remiss if I didn't say the most important thing that we have learned during this time is the importance of Maslow's. And I know everyone was like, well, of course. But I think it took on a different meaning. It took on a different meaning when a year ago, the number one thing I was doing at this time was determining how we were going to deliver meals daily to our families who had no other way of getting food if it was not coming from the school district, and how I immediately within days we deployed thousands of meals daily to 17 apartment complexes as well as 12 different school buildings. That if that is not evidence of what it means to real world problem solve, and students were a part of that, we used our transportation team, our child nutrition team, but meeting that basic need. Before I could worry about whether or not the kids could even get on the Zoom, I had to make sure that they were being fed, and that they were not worried about where that next meal was, because it was no longer they were going to walk in the cafeteria on Monday morning and they were going to be guaranteed that hot breakfast. And that was something. And then I think this focus on social emotional learning, and recognizing that this has been a time of uncertainty for all, and whether parents, our students, our staff, our teachers. Last night we were at a board meeting until 1:30 in the morning. We were at a board meeting, and we had some community members that are still trying to negotiate, and are still struggling with some of our risk mitigation protocols. And that is a telling a big telling piece around social emotional learning. How are we supporting our students with the fact that they were used to school looking one way, even when they returned face to face? And 68% of our kids are back face to face right now, but they were used to school looking one way. And now it looks very different. Now, how I interact with my best friend at lunch, I now interact with them behind a desk shield, and we're 6 feet apart. But I am desperate for that human connection. And how do we help students with that? And teachers, we ask teachers to on a moment's notice, because if we have to contact trace and we have to quarantine a group of students, suddenly tomorrow I may have half of my class that is logging in through Zoom and the other half is in face to face. And we're asking our teachers to design, normally, which it's really hard to do one or the other by itself. But now we're asking them to design instruction for both environments, and while meeting the needs of all. So supporting and lifting up our teachers and ensuring that they had the social emotional skill sets necessary to navigate this time, is just a huge priority, and one that we took for granted, y'all. We had a social emotional curriculum. Don't get me wrong. We taught it, a couple of days a week across our whole system, but we had taken for granted, what does it mean when those skill sets are gained with such automaticity, that when our teachers or when our students experience a true crisis, they can pull those coping skills and strategies out without thinking. And we had taken that for granted. And that is something that we are really, we have rethought, we have reexamined, and we are taking that forward. And then one more thing I'm going to add, and then I promise, Kendra, because but I get so pumped up about this. The other thing that I would say, that we are taking from where we are, and we want to move forward in our journey as a learning organization, is recognizing, because of our diversity, the fact that we had such a disparate systems of support for our students, and recognizing that academic achievement gap that we had committed ourselves to closing as part of our equity goals, that we were risking that gap getting farther apart rather than closing. And that our Latinx and our Black students were at risk if we didn't think about our supports and deploying supports differently. And even through a pandemic, we have formed a racial equity committee that has almost 200 community students and parents and teachers involved, asking ourselves, we've learned a lot about the differences that exist across our communities. And as a district, what are we doing to close that gap? Whether it's technology, whether it's support and access to extracurriculars, whether it's wraparound services. And how do we provide wraparound services to students who may not otherwise have access? And so that is another big component of the things that we have learned through this time and that we want to carry forward.
Tabitha, I just love the way you're personifying. I heard a phrase, never let a good crisis go to waste. You're really looking at everything you guys were doing and trying to figure out if what you did in the past was worth it or needs to quit, needs to stop. And I've seen in a lot of districts, they're looking at the data and saying, well, these kids aren't in school. And so they're not having discipline referrals. They're not getting in fights in the hall. They're not doing all these other things. Yes. So what are you going to do about it so that that doesn't happen when they come back? And so, of course, you are leading the way and trying to figure all of that out. We did have a question. Someone asked, is there an intentional focus on PBL as you're doing STEM for all? And if so, why? And one of you can answer
I
that.
want to start, and then Kendra like makes the magic happen. I have the vision, and then Kendra makes the magic happen. Okay, y'all. So I do not want to mislead anyone. You can have incredible, engaging instruction happen in a traditional environment. You can have a teacher that does not employ project-based learning, and still have a wonderful classroom where kids are going to learn and the outcomes are going to be great. However, I do believe that learning, and especially this achievement gap, that closing can be accelerated when you create an environment in which students have clarity around the why behind what I'm learning. They get to drive the learning. They get to ask the question. You don't have to assume what I need to know. Let me help drive and determine what our need to knows are. And then let me identify what is the best way that I can show you, and create an artifact that demonstrates to you that I have deeply mastered a concept or a skill. And that's what happens in PBL. And I don't know that you can replicate that in any other way. I don't know if you can replicate the true marriage that happens when, in a classroom, in instruction, when it is completely student driven, measured by true learning, true academic outcomes, and then fosters these skill sets that we know as important as our content knowledge and skills, these future ready skills. Can they collaborate? Can they communicate? Can they problem solve? Do they have resiliency? Do they have the ability to have professional ethics where I'm making choices that I know are healthy and are going to promote, success at the next level? That is the marriage that happens with PBL. And that's why I personally believe in it. Had the opportunity to open and design a choice PBL one-to-one campus in which, to hear kids talk about their learning differently. It was no longer, well, I'm going to learn, how to solve for quadratic equations, and then I'm going to have to show you how to learn it on a test. Instead, they were able to articulate, how am I going to use this skill? I have to know this skill in order to be able to create this solution or design the solution that I have an idea for solving this like mind blowing, right? That's what we want for kids. And that's what I think PBL does. But Kendra, how do we make that happen?
So the first thing is, let's think about teaching and learning through the lens of the student. And as our role as educators, our primary responsibility is to do what? Prepare kids for their future, right? And we believe that in order to do that, we know our kids need to be engaged in lessons and units that allow them to see the relevancy. They can engage in critical thinking, they can be collaborative. Most importantly, they are problem solvers. We want our kids to be global citizens and build and strengthen their self efficacy. The best way to do that is through an authentic learning approach. So, project and problem based learning, yes, we are making intentional strides towards shifting to that being one of our premier instructional strategies. As you saw at the beginning of our session, our district is highly diverse, and we're leveraging that diversity to drive our innovation. And we know in order to do that, we have to engage all of our students and their families and the community around this new type of learning, this different way of thinking about and making our thinking visible. And how are we applying that in a real world context? We've grown to appreciate our partnerships. And I'll tell you, it's more than just about buying a resource. It's more than just connecting with them to help us solve a problem. Our kids are getting a window into their future. those choices and interests that they are finding connected to the pathways that you saw us highlight, now we can tie that to a mentor and to someone in business and industry that can work with not only the students, but our teachers as well. And so over the last 12 months, what we've really done is made intentional efforts to update our curriculum design to make sure teachers had access to the resources and technology they needed. But more importantly, we really started to forge more strategic alliances with our partnerships in business and industry. We know we can't do this by ourselves. We don't want this to be textbook learning. We want it to be authentic and discrepant, and we want our kids to be able to, really engage and assume the role or the responsibility of the professionals who are solving these problems. One such opportunity just came to our district about 3 weeks ago. We were happy to celebrate Black History Month, National CTE Month, but also we wanted to celebrate a partnership that's new for RASD, but not new to Texas and North Texas. I have had the privilege of working with one of our partners, Captain Barrington Irving Jr., the CEO and founder of the Flying Classroom and the STEM Plus curriculum. In addition to us utilizing defined learning PBLs and our teachers being trained on those webinars and understanding by design framework, we definitely wanted to partner with someone who could help us continue in the vein of hands-on inquiry-based instruction in a virtual world. I have a very short clip where our superintendent and Captain Irving are sharing with you how we are going to support virtual STEM teaching and learning moving forward, and how these resources are supporting not only what we're doing now virtually, but we can continue with these pieces once we move forward out of this pandemic.
Hello, my name is Richard Thacker with Atlantic Aviation. Welcome to Atlantic Addison, Texas, where we are hosting our good friend Barrington Irving on another flying classroom experience with the Richardson County School District.
This is going to be an amazing day. This is part of what we do with students, where we want them to not only see STEM, but experience it as well.
Today we have the opportunity to bring out some elementary school kids, some of our high school kids that are part of our Berkner STEM feeder pattern, to just inspire them about the aviation pathway.
Today was STEM-sational. Today is the launch of our Flying Classroom curriculum. We had an opportunity to kick off Black History Month honoring one of the greatest, and he's still alive. That's the exciting part of this. And our kids get to connect with some real world learning.
This is so important because the majority of these kids, when we ask them, have you ever been to the airport? Have you ever flown in an airplane? Most of them say no. They have not even had that experience. So this is about opening in their mind the possibility that they could not only be a part of this field, but they could learn to fly an airplane.
Not only do I hope that kids understand that they can do anything that they set their minds to, but I really hope that today they had an opportunity to see all of the possibilities that you find in STEM-related careers.
Atlantic Aviation has had a great impact already on Richardson ISD by just opening themselves up for us to bring our students here. And we need partners like that because kids have to see it if they're really going to be able to ever be it. We're so grateful to just Atlantic Aviation for welcoming our kids and letting them have this experience today.
Who knew that you'd be able to do surgery on a cow's eye by listening to a pilot? And so we're hoping that today would pique some curiosity and interest in our students to want to learn more about STEM.
They have no clue what they're about to experience these next several weeks doing hands-on STEM challenges, and the smiles are just going to get bigger and bigger. Big thank you to the STEM department and Richardson ISD and Atlantic Aviation for giving us this opportunity.
So Kendra, talk to this amazing group of people that are on this webinar about, so now what? So our students had the chance to go to this airport. They met Captain Barrington. They got a chance to, y'all, they were like, you could have seen their eyes. Not only had most of them not ever flown anywhere, most of them have never been, like, the thought of being that close to an airplane and seeing like, oh my gosh, these parts that we've read about or that we've seen, even our high school students, y'all, they were in awe, like their jaw, like it was transformational, just that experience. But they had that, then they left. And then now what's happening with Captain Barrington?
So every Friday now until the end of the school year and beyond, we will host what we call Fly Fridays. And what happens on Fly Fridays is our teachers and students take a break from their state adopted curriculum to engage in real world, what Barrington calls ground expeditions, centered around STEM concepts and aligned to some of the topics and concepts they learn in science, math, social studies, fine arts, humanities in every day. And so what they have is their own materials kit. And they have an opportunity to connect with Captain Irving and his team every Friday for a solid hour. And he is sharing with them these expeditions that he has conducted around the world that they are now able to perform different STEM investigations alongside him. So not only are they learning about phenomena that is happening in real world, but they're also tying it to the math and science that they're learning and the other subjects that they're learning in school. So it's no longer just, oh, we're going to connect with him and have him as a guest speaker. Our students are now assuming the role of scientists and engineers, and they are able to perform the same tasks, the same engage in the same challenges that the professionals do. And Barrington is leading the way, flying his aircraft around the world and taking our students along with it. Talk about a virtual field trip. This is something that I know our students will never forget. And we are so excited to initiate this partnership here in Richardson. And we can't wait to scale it across the district. But more importantly, parents can now also be involved because that material kit, even our kids that are still virtual, we have shipped them to their homes and delivered them there. So now they have exactly what the students have. So talk about equity and making sure we're taking care of our students and families, whether they're in our schools or away from us right now. We are really committed to doing so. And we are glad to share some of our other partners who are supporting this work as well. We are utilizing a lot of our regional and local partners to help us facilitate a lot of our virtual STEM opportunities. And this is just one of them. And we wanted to celebrate and share that with you guys today.
It's amazing. Everybody wants to come join and go do Fly Fridays with you. It's pretty awesome. But we did have a question and a statement in the chat room. Like we can see as educators, as teachers, we would want to come work with you and do this. We can see how kids will be excited, parents will be excited. What are you doing for the administrators? At COVID-19, I have many friends who are principals, and I'm praying for them on a daily basis. Like their life has been really hard. How have you supported them to do PBL and STEM during this time of COVID?
Yeah, so I would first say that from a central team, um, we really risked doing what we probably would have done in most situations, in that it's the job of the principal to take care of the teachers and the students. And without a clarity around the number one thing that we do at our level, like when we really do think about the triangle. You always think about the person at the top, and then everyone else is underneath that person. The superintendent's at the top, and then there's the deputy, and then the assistant soups. And we have inverted that triangle. And at the very bottom of that triangle is our superintendent, followed by me. And our only job is to lift everyone else up. Our only job is to support those at the top of the triangle. And the most important are our students, followed by our teachers because they are closest. But in order for our teachers to thrive during this time, our principals, they had to feel like they were being supported. And so first, before like we could help them translate what does PBL and how do I support STEM learning in my building during COVID, first we had to make sure that that they were supported in their social, like how are you adjusting to leading differently. you as a principal, like y'all, you all know, like those of you who have been principals or currently principals, there's nothing better than when you walk down the hall and your cup is filled, no matter what that angry parent meeting you just walked out of, your cup is filled because the kids are hugging on you and telling you what they learned, or you walked into that favorite teacher's classroom and you saw this magic of instruction, and now it looks completely different. And so, really being overt with our principals about that conversation, about how their leadership was going to have to adjust during this time, how they were, what skill sets were they maybe going to have to think about differently in terms of flexibility. Sometimes principals aren't always flexible. But at this time, every 9 weeks, the students who are walking in and out of their buildings daily, if they're quarantined, can change. And so making sure that as principals were struggling with applying maybe some different skills that they've never had before, that instead of them feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm lacking. No, how are we going to build you up and how are we going to support you? So that focus on social emotional and growing the capacity of our leaders during this time and exercising a different skill set than maybe they've ever had to do before was our number one. Like that was our number one priority. And then that translated into Kendra being able to work with our principals and helping them grow in PBL and implementing PBL during this time. So what did that look like, Kendra?
It started with effective communication, just making sure that our principals understood we were being flexible, we were going to adapt. We knew that this was something we started before we had a pandemic. And a lot of you don't know, we dealt with a tornado as well during this same time. But we were resilient. And so we made sure that there was a shared understanding of how we would move forward with PBLs. We put our big, you know, figurative arms around our leaders and just let them know that we're here. And if you notice on our first slide, we had an image called "We've Got This," and that became our mantra for the year. Is we wanted them to see that we were all in this together, and part of that was frequent weekly communication. We were on campuses even with COVID. We were very careful, but we wanted to make sure that they knew we were there, and we made ourselves available and accessible to their teachers, their campus instructional coaches, their assistant principals. We were providing them with information. We create these voiceover recordings. Our teaching and learning team started building pre-recorded unit previews. Anything we did, we created a hub for our administrators that housed all of the information that we knew that they would need, and the communication. We made sure that if it was information that we had, that they had it in a format to push it out on their campus newsletters and in their parent engagement opportunities that were campus based. But most importantly, we were an ear. We were an ear, we were a shoulder. And now they're calling us superheroes, though we don't feel like it. But we've even made ourselves accessible and available to our leaders when they need substitutes. We all know that there's a shortage of those, and our teachers are not only helping us navigate this uncertain world in schools, but they too are navigating this at their own homes. And so our central office team, like Tab said, that inverted pyramid is profound. And we look at it as we are holding up our teachers and our students and making sure that no matter what, they know we're there and they have the support and resources they need to continue building and sustaining this STEM for all culture that we initiated back in 2018.
Y'all, like it's for real. Like, so when she talks about a superhero sub, I've been subbing. I try to sub at least every other Friday because again, staff maybe who gets quarantined, they can still work from home, or maybe we just because of whatever we've had a sub shortage. Maybe nobody else out there is experiencing that, but we are. And so instead of that being one more stressor on our principals, of figuring out how am I going to cover classes, or putting one more stress on teachers of we can't combine classes because then we're mixing cohorts, or like, no, our central office team, we are going to deploy ourselves. And I had a chance to sub in one of our Berkner Learning Community classrooms. Remember, I'm a secondary teacher and I was in a kindergarten classroom. And y'all for reals. And our kindergarten babies were talking about problem solving. Like they were using the language. That doesn't happen in isolation. That doesn't happen because a teacher does one unit that is modeling that problem solving cycle in their classroom. That only happens over time, over reinforcement. That happens when they are having conversations in the hallways, when their principal, like that happens, is that is representative of the culture. Like when, and Cindy Moss, like one of our first connections, was like STEM is not a class, it's a culture. What we have done and what we are we're not there yet, but what we are doing is we are building a culture. We are building a culture where our principals they see the difference that these experiences are having for kids, and as a result they are committed to removing the barriers that keep that from happening. Carol McBroom is on this webinar. She's probably one of our strongest instructional coaches at Liberty Junior High and in Richardson ISD. She's brilliant, y'all. Like I could just talk to her. Like she teaches me every time I talk to her in the hallway. And her campus is evidence of a belief and a change in culture. A year ago, pre-pandemic or not, if you would have told me that 100% of students in her campus and in her sister campus could be accessing 8th grade algebra 1, 100% of her grade load could be accessing algebra 1, I would have been like, that's another district. I don't know what you're talking about, because that's not our reality. A year later, that is our reality.
Woohoo! And
That is our reality. And that
that's what
only
STEM
happens,
does. Yeah.
right? It is like that only happens as a result of culture. Like that's a change in culture and belief. And then you identify what are the barriers, what are the systems that are keeping us, and you dismantle them, you break them down, and you rebuild them.
Yeah.
And those are the practices that we've had to apply every day during a pandemic, and that we now see that they can work on everyday problems, whether they're small or big. And that's a really big part of this work.
You guys are amazing. We could listen to you for several more hours, but we have to take a little break before the next one. People on the webinar, make sure you pay attention to the contact information for these ladies at Richardson ISD. And once we can travel, if you get a chance to go visit them, you should. We brought people to visit them from all over. They're incredible. So thank you, Tabitha. Thank you, Kendra. My Stamigos,
Can
you're
I just
wonderful.
Can I say one thing? I know you have to go. I know everyone needs a break. I know. But I just one thing, if I could leave all of these amazing educators that I know are on this, is remember you don't have to do this alone. And I just would be remiss if I didn't thank Cindy Moss, Philip, Defined Learning. There is no way we could have navigated this reality without the partnership of others, the thought partners, the inspirational partners, the ones who said, yeah, this can be done and this is what it can look like, without us having to recreate everything. Like because of Defined Learning, then that allows us to use our human resources in a different way that allows our teachers to access the amazing content that's in Defined Learning. So I just wanted to, I would be remiss if I did not give you all a shout out and thank you for providing these kinds of opportunities for us to connect and collaborate and learn from one another, because it's difference making for kids.
Yes, it is. Thank you, guys. And tune in 7 minutes. We're going to start with Team Talladega, and they're not the NASCAR drivers, but they're amazing leaders of education as well, have been doing PBL for a long time. So take a break, go to the bathroom, get a cup of coffee, come back in 7 minutes. So thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.